Should counselors give advice? So I find this an interesting topic, and likewise, a pretty interesting debate that has been going on, right, to some degree for many years now. And so I'd like to start out with, just kind of to conceptualize this and begin thinking through it out loud with you all. What is it that counselors do, right? So different than what should they do. Let's just take a look at what they presently do. So to my knowledge, counselors get trained pretty well in um, listening. Okay. So what do they do then at the outset? Well, at the outset, they tend to listen quite a bit and likewise ask questions. Now, some of those questions very likely guided questions towards a specific end, but they really try to get to know their client. Um, and probably, depending on the counselor, but most of them are analyzing during that time, right? Attempting to find missing pieces or pieces that are in the wrong spot, pieces that are in the wrong order, something along those lines. And they're analyzing their client through listening to them and what they have to say, and also through observation, right? Observation of their gestures and their mannerisms, and are they anxious and reserved and shy, right? Or are they forward and direct and confident? Are they angry, right? Are they bitter? Where do the problems really lie, right? Are the problems primarily personal? Are they more relational, right? Are they mental? Are they emotional? Are they spiritual, right? On and on the list goes. That the counselor is going to start out by being a good listening ear, and in that process, observing and analyzing the client, right? Ultimately, to what? To make some sort of interpretation, which ends up being called in the field of mental health a diagnosis. And due to that process, and then due to some counselors, and maybe a decent amount of them, not going well beyond that process, um, then the term glorified or professional listeners has entered into our. Are we really paying somebody? Excuse me. Are we really paying somebody 150 an hour or whatever the going rate is to listen to us, to be a professional listener? Well, I happen to have, friends and, any number of people that can sit there and listen to me. By the way, pretty much for free, right? Maybe I take them to lunch, but that's about it. And so I start to think, real quick, well, a counselor, especially a Christian counselor or a professional counselor, well, I mean, they got to be more than that, right? Now, not knocking on listening because it's an incredibly essential part of the process, no doubt, right? You must observe and take in the information before you're going to be ultimately able to fulfill your role as a counselor, right? You grow the space and the relationship with security, but to what end? For what purpose? Well, so you can be a counselor, of course, right? Which means to counsel someone, right? To offer them counsel. Well, so then now we have to ask the question, well, then what is that? I've been asking people this question for a really long time. Um, and I've gotten a lot of interesting answers. And those answers tend to be, right, like if we were creating a bubble of all the words of all the answers that people give, And the ones that are given most often are the biggest words in the center of the bubble. Well, those tend to be a word like advocate and a word like guide and a word like helper. Um, and those are all great words. I think there's solid value in each of those. And so, if that's true, then a counselor is going to listen and observe and analyze and then offer an interpretation and then advocate for something. Well, for what then? We might ask. And then guide. They're going to guide, right? Another good synonym for the word counselor. I'm here to be your guide. Well, towards what goal, right? To what aim are we guiding them in, right? How are we guiding them? In what way are we advocating for our clients? Likewise, helper, great synonym as well. Like I'm here, right? So as a counselor, I'm here to offer you help. Well, great. What kind of help then? I ask. The other term would be healer. So I am going to help by the grace of God, Him working through me. I'm going to help bring you some healing, right? Like maybe a doctor would, a nutritionist would, a surgeon would. But of course, in a different space for us, in a more metaphysical space, a mental space, an emotional space, a relational or spiritual space, right? That is just as real, just harder to be unified on that, right? So the client would like for me to advocate for them to reconcile with their spouse or their child. And I may be in agreement with that. And so then I do. So I advocate for them to reconcile, right? Or to enter into rehab and start the recovery process, right? From their addiction that they've been suffering with for many years. And I'm going to advocate for them to recover. Someone who has tremendous trauma, needs trauma recovery. Yeah, I'm going to advocate for them to overcome, right? To work through that trauma, to face their fears, AKA exposure therapy, right? Likewise, they have an unhealthy relationship and they need to set up boundaries. Well, yeah, I'm going to advocate for them to set up those boundaries. Absolutely. So advocate is a good synonym, right? In many regards. Likewise, am I going to help them in all those ways? Well, yeah, I'm going to help them too. But in the most fundamental sense, the help that I'm offering, the guidance that I give, ultimately always ends up being advice, and there is no way around that. And so, the most accurate synonym for a counselor is an advisor, right? Whether they mean for it or not, whether they want that to be the case or not. So, just work through this with me here, real quick. What thing do I offer a client in which I am not advising them basically to do it? Right? Like, so if I'm advocating for my client to enter into rehab and start the recovery process, or return to rehab, or go to an IOP, or continue in their addiction, counseling, right? All for the point of staying on the road to recovery. Am I not advising them that that is the best course of action for their life? Well, of course I am. Now, I may be doing it indirectly. I may be doing it subtly. I may be doing it through tons of guided questions, right? But it's all because I think that they should recover rather than be an addict for the rest of their life. So, of course, I believe that's what they should do, which ultimately is the role of a counselor, by the way, and especially a Christian counselor who I'm really here attempting to advocate for, right? To pass some words of wisdom to, that ultimately all counselors are advisors, but Christian counselors absolutely should be advisors. Counseling to counsel someone in a way that satisfies them temporarily, but not eternally. And that is unfortunately the state of um, the vast majority of counseling in America, right? The most of it is secular, most of it is. And so this secular therapist believes in affirmation care. And so then, of course, so then the client comes to them. And what does the therapist do? Well, they affirm them, of course, right? So validation, empathy, and then even a step beyond that, affirmation. You know what you're really doing, what you're trying to do, what you need to do is actually good and right. It's, I just want to affirm you in this decision that you are making. What towards what end? Well, of course, these days, in regards to your sexuality, right? But it could be anything in regards to setting up boundaries, in regards to reconciling or not reconciling, seeking after a promotion at your work or not, um, and on the list goes. And so, see, the counselor, as secular as they may be, well, they still have beliefs too. And so they are engaging in what they believe is best for the client, what the client should do, right? Now, they may never say the words, you should do this, but it is so incredibly obvious by all the quote therapy, right, that they are giving, right? When I tell somebody, hey, you know what could really help you with your anxiety? Deep breathing exercises. How am I not saying the words, even though they're implied, but how is the message not being sent that I obviously think deep breathing exercises is what this person should do, right? What? To better their life, to help them overcome anxiety. Likewise on that one too. Um, anyways, so yeah, so should counselors give advice? Well, absolutely. Otherwise, you're not a counselor. So go be something else, right? So be a listener, be a professional listener. Just be a healer and just try to heal people. Be something else, but don't be a counselor unless you're going to advise people in the best way for them to live their life, whatever it may be. And yes, you must listen well, you must observe well, you must grow your therapeutic relationship in order to be able to offer them good advice when the time comes. I am not saying that one should rush advice. Absolutely not, right? I do my very best to hang back and gather all the information I can gather before offering what I believe to be the best advice for the client, for them to live the best life that they can live, the life that God meant for them to live. And I have a strong feeling that even though not everyone believes the same things as me, all counselors in a way go about it similarly.